Have you ever stood in a place so silent, so untouched, that it felt like the earth itself was holding its breath, watching you, waiting? In the far southeastern corner of Arizona, hidden away from highways and city lights, there exists such a place. It is a wilderness of jagged stone towers, deep shadowed canyons, and ancient trails that twist through a land both beautiful and unforgiving. It is a place where the wind whistles through rock spires like ghostly flutes, where shadows stretch long across the desert floor, and where, once, you could find Ranger Paul Fugate making his daily patrols. But on one ordinary winter afternoon in 1980, Fugate walked into this land and was never seen again. Not by his friends, not by his family, not even by the dozens of search teams who scoured every ridge, gully, and dry riverbed. His disappearance remains one of the most haunting, unsolved mysteries in the history of America's national parks. The Chiricahua Mountains rise suddenly from the desert like the ruins of some alien city. In every direction, nature has sculpted the stone into impossible shapes. Massive boulders balanced precariously atop slender pillars, spires twisting upward toward the blazing Arizona sun. This is the Chiricahua National Monument, a place the National Park Service describes as a wonderland of rocks. To the casual visitor, it is a photographer's dream. To those who know its moods, it can be a trap. Steep gullies cut through the landscape like deep scars, hiding rattlesnakes in their cool shadows. Rock slides can happen without warning. The weather changes quickly here. Clear skies can darken to storm clouds in less than an hour. The isolation is absolute. Once you leave the visitor center, you are swallowed by silence broken only by the crunch of your boots on gravel and the distant call of ravens echoing off the stone walls. The monument holds a place on the National Register of Historic Places, celebrated for its geological wonders and storied past. But along with its postcard beauty comes a darker history. Whispers of accidents, missteps, and, in rare cases, disappearances that no amount of search effort could solve. In January of 1980, the monument's resident law enforcement ranger was a 41-year-old named Paul Fugate. Colleagues described him as committed and spirited, a man who genuinely loved his work. He had a quick smile, a knack for engaging with visitors, and a deep knowledge of the region's terrain and geology. He knew which trails offered the best views of balancing rocks, which switchbacks would test a hiker's legs, and which gullies were better avoided after a rain. Fugate wasn't just a desk-bound ranger. He was a man of the trails. Hiking wasn't a duty for him. It was part of who he was. He approached his patrols the way some approach a craft, with both skill and care. His friends knew him as someone who enjoyed a quiet challenge and sought out adventure in measured doses. That Sunday, January 13th, was unremarkable in most ways. It was winter in Arizona, cool and clear, with the low sun casting gold light over the stone towers. At the park's visitor center, Fugate worked alongside a seasonal staff member. At some point in the early afternoon, he mentioned he would be heading out to check the trail leading to a newly acquired 400-acre section of land known as Fairway Ranch. The plan was simple. It was to be a short hike, just out and back along the Walmart Trail toward Fairway Ranch. Fugate didn't even take his radio, a sign that he expected to be back in plenty of time. He wore his full National Park Service uniform that day. The flat-brimmed hat, the pressed green shirt with his badge shining in the light, and sturdy trousers tucked into hiking boots. He told the staff member that if he wasn't back by 4:30, they should close the center without him. With that, he stepped outside, waved goodbye, and walked toward the trailhead. The sound of his boots faded against the gravel, swallowed by the distance. The winter air was still. Even the wind seemed to pause. That was the last confirmed time anyone saw Paul Fugate alive. 4:30 came and went. The visitor center was locked up for the day, and there was still no sign of Fugate. At first, there may have been no panic. This was a seasoned ranger, after all. Someone who knew the land and could take care of himself. But when darkness began to fall over the Chiricahuas and the temperature dropped, unease began to grow. By nightfall, the alarm was sounded, and an organized search began. The operation quickly grew into a massive, multi-agency effort. Tracking dogs padded over the dusty trails, their handlers scanning the ground for prints or dropped items. Aircraft circled overhead, dipping low over ridges and ravines. Hundreds of law enforcement personnel joined the effort: the National Park Service, the local sheriff's department, the Bureau of Land Management, the U.S. Forest Service, and the Southern Arizona Search and Rescue Association. Family members and volunteers combed the land as well, starting with the trail to Fairway Ranch. They looked under rock outcrops, through narrow canyons, and in dry creek beds where water might pool after rain. The search expanded to cover 17 square miles of the most rugged terrain the park had to offer. What the searchers didn't find was perhaps more haunting than anything they could have found. There were no footprints leading off the trail, no scraps of uniform cloth snagged on thorns, no dropped gear. Even the dogs, so often the most reliable tool in a search, found nothing to follow. It was as if Fugate had simply walked into the rock formations and vanished into thin air. As the days passed without results, desperation set in. The Park Service posted a $5,000 reward for information, which soon increased to $20,000. Calls came in, tips were followed, but every lead ended in nothing. Then came the strangest clue of all. A witness stepped forward claiming to have seen something unsettling. Under hypnosis, this person recalled seeing Paul Fugate, apparently unconscious, inside a truck between two unidentified men. The mental image was disturbing. The ranger slumped between strangers, his head tilted, his hat possibly missing. But there was a problem. There was no corroborating evidence, no matching truck sighted elsewhere, no physical trace to suggest an abduction. Even the witness admitted, once out of hypnosis, that they could have been mistaken. The tip about the fast-moving truck, possibly carrying Paul Fugate, was the kind of lead investigators wanted desperately to be true. If verified, it could have given the search a direction. But like so many other fragments in this case, it evaporated under scrutiny. The vehicle was long gone. No license plate, no further sightings, and no physical evidence that Fugate had ever been inside. In the absence of facts, speculation rushed in. Around campfires, in ranger stations, and in quiet conversations at local cafes, theories took shape. The most popular and most unsettling was that Fugate had stumbled upon something he wasn't meant to see. Some believed it was drug activity. Southeastern Arizona in 1980 was not immune to smuggling routes. If he had crossed paths with traffickers in a remote corner of the monument, the theory went, they might have kidnapped or killed him to protect their operation. There were other possibilities, too. Perhaps, some suggested, Fugate had been attacked by a wild animal, a mountain lion, maybe, or a bear. But to those who knew him, the idea didn't quite fit. He was too experienced, too aware of his surroundings. Others floated the theory of an accident, a misstep on loose rock, a fall into a canyon. Yet search teams had combed those gullies, even rappelling into dangerous spots, and found nothing. Then there was the theory that cut deepest for those closest to him, that he had chosen to vanish. They pointed to one curious detail. Before leaving, he had told the seasonal staffer to close the visitor center if he hadn't returned by 4:30. Some saw this as a hint he knew he might be gone longer than planned. But his family pushed back hard on that narrative. He had left behind his money, his car, his camera equipment, and the restoration project he had been pouring his spare time into. Nothing suggested a man preparing to walk away from his life. Barbara Elfbrand, a longtime friend of both Paul and his wife Dodie, still finds herself circling back to the mystery after all these years. I don't have the beliefs I did originally, that it would be solved, she admitted. All the good clues or breakthroughs have led to walls they just couldn't get through. I know Paul didn't just leave on his own. I'd like to know what happened to him. It would be closure. It would be peace. That longing for answers hung over the investigation like the Arizona heat haze, always there, distorting the view, but never giving form to the truth. In 1986, with no body and no definitive evidence, the National Park Service officially declared Paul Fugate deceased. The decision was procedural, perhaps necessary for certain legal matters, but it did nothing to settle the unease. Critics accused authorities of failing to exhaust all avenues, of not extending the search far enough beyond park boundaries, of the FBI treating the case as little more than a formality to be filed away. Meanwhile, the theories refused to die. The drug dealer theory persisted. The wild animal attack theory lingered. The voluntary disappearance theory still cropped up in conversations, even when contradicted by the facts. But none of them could be proven, and the absence of proof only deepened the shadows around the case. Then, in June of 2018, 38 years after Paul Fugate vanished, the National Park Service made an announcement no one expected. The case was being reopened. The statement was abrupt, offering no details about why, but it came with a significant change. The reward for information had been increased to $60,000. The official line was that new evidence had prompted the move. But when pressed, the Park Service declined interviews, issuing only a carefully worded reply, "We have no new information." The contradiction was glaring. How could there be new evidence, but no new information? The ambiguity ignited speculation all over again. For those who had followed the case since 1980, the reopening felt both hopeful and haunting. Did authorities have a lead they couldn't disclose? Had someone come forward after decades of silence? Or was it an internal decision to simply try again, in the hope that public attention might shake something loose? The truth was, cases like this almost never get reopened without reason, and yet, without specifics, the reasons here remained locked behind official doors. Even in the realm of unsolved disappearances, that kind of silence is unusual and telling. In the long history of the National Park Service, rangers have gone missing before, but almost always, sooner or later, something is found: a body, a boot, a piece of equipment. In Paul Fugate's case, nothing has ever surfaced. Not one scrap of clothing, not one personal item, not one confirmed sighting. Nearly 4 decades after he stepped onto the Walmart trail that January afternoon, the land has not given him back. The rock towers still stand in their silent watch. The wind still whistles through the canyons. And somewhere, in that vast and rugged expanse, or perhaps far beyond it, the truth about what happened to Ranger Paul Fugate is still waiting. So what do you believe? Did Paul Fugate stumble into danger and pay the ultimate price? Was he taken by human hands? Or did he choose to walk away, leaving behind everything he knew? Or is the answer something no one has yet imagined? Because in the Chiricahua National Monument, where the landscape feels almost alive, some mysteries refuse to be buried.